Welcome back to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins. Now, on this side of the hour, we have another candidate that's running for the District 1 City Council seat, and that would be Miss Lydia Edwards, who has a fantastic story, and you're going to hear all about it. And so thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. So first and foremost, talk to us about the actual campaigning. How does it feel to be back out there, knocking on doors and walking among the people and listening to them tell you what they feel the issues of importance are?
Yeah, I think that's actually the best part about campaigning is the voter connection, is meeting with folks, hearing and listening and learning from them, and really understanding from the grassroots what our district is dealing with, and how I think some of the best ideas we'll ever have will be from the community that's impacted by traffic, by housing, by education, and to hear from them directly about what they not only want for their community, but what they want their city councilor to do about it.
So let's talk about some of those issues, and let's begin with housing. Prior to running for office, what was your position in city government?
I was the Deputy Director of the Office of Housing Stability.
So talk about housing stability, particularly around the whole issue of workforce development housing, or what I would like to call low and moderate income housing. We have a lot of units that are coming online, but they're high price units.
They are.
What do you do? What do you say? How do we work with those young families, those college students that need to have an affordable living space?
Yeah. I think one thing we need to understand as a city and as a narrative in general is that market rate housing and affordable units are deeply connected. And I learned that in the city. So in order to pay for affordable units, you do need a certain amount of market units. So once you have that equation, then it's really a question of then how do we continue to pay for more affordable units for our middle class? The goal, I think, of my office and what I've learned for any urban center is to stabilize and maintain and grow your middle class. You want to assure also that your working poor and your working class folks are also able to stay in the city. But if you grow the middle class, you stabilize our housing market. And from there, a lot more people have pathways to ownership. And so you look at different things in scenarios. You have to bring the developers to the table. You have to bring landlords, property owners, small property owners, and tenants all to the table to really come up with sustainable policies. What we don't want to do is get stuck in the developer versus community conversation, because developers is a big word. There's there's a lot of kinds. There's some ones that we love and are actually working on family housing, workforce housing, and then there's some that literally just come here, are speculators, have no intention of staying here and are going to take the city for all it's worth. And the city needs to then respond to them differently. You know, with those who are coming in and targeting Boston just as a place to make money and leave, well, the city needs to respond with some more fees, some more taxes to slow them down, if not chase them out of town. But those who are living here, there are a lot of developers who live in our community who are excited about seeing it grow. We want to incentivize them and figure out what is the right ratio for them to make a profit and for us to grow our middle class and affordable housing units. Right. And then finally, pathways to ownership has got to be at the forefront. All the units that we're creating, if they are affordable, I want to see less of them being for renters and more where if they are for renters, they're starting out as renters but becoming owners. So rent-to-own programs, looking at pathways to ownership and housing cooperatives, looking at the land trust model. How do we begin to plant the seeds to keep people here and to get them to ownership? So we're going to go through, we've only got about 20 minutes, and so we're going to hit a bunch of issues really quick, but I just want to circle back to the thing you said about the middle class. Yeah. What I look at as the vanishing or vanished middle class. How do we ensure that we can keep people in the city, live in the city, work in the city, grow their families in the city, and not leave because of the fact that they can't find either stable housing or education? Right. How do we fortify those folks? I think we need to talk like that. I think we need to actually say there are two things that are driving our middle class out of Boston. Either the lack of housing, and that could include a pathway to home ownership, and the schools. I'm finding families, if they're not able to get into a local school that might be at a level 1, they are leaving. Right? And so we need to think about, because I firmly believe in public education and having access to good neighborhood schools, how we are going to revamp both systems to really focus on growing our middle class. That's what I think we need to have in terms of a conversation. And what I want to also emphasize is, it's development without displacement. That's the goal. We want to grow Boston. It's a beautiful city to have. the fact that people want to be here is the good thing. But we want to make sure those who have already been here, who stuck through the good, bad, and some parts of the more difficult time,
Right.
also have a home here. And we need to really look at also who we're inviting in terms of industry to come here and how they pay their workers. You know, we want to make sure that we're actually inviting good jobs to this area, and that we're actually employing local, either in our construction projects, and if Amazon does choose to come here, who are they employing and how are they paying them? Those are equations that the city constantly needs to be driving, and conversations, that we need to be driving.
So I want to ask you about pay equity, but before we go there, I want to ask you about public schools versus charter schools and our education system. Where do you come down on that issue?
So I think, well, first, I'm a product of public schools. I'm very proud to stand by them. That being said, I want the conversation to be more. It's not enough to say public and charter anymore. The question, to me, education is a civil right.
Okay.
Quality access to free education is a civil right. So if there are folks who are not getting access to that continually, perpetually, by generations,
right.
If there are people who do not feel, due to the fact that they either don't speak English or the fact that their parents don't have a lot of money or wherever they live geographically, if skin color and zip code are determining your access to education, then we need to pull back, because now we have a system problem, right? And so we can go and narrow our debate to public versus charter, and miss the whole system question, right? It's the redesign of our system that we need to discuss.
That's a mammoth undertaking, though.
It's a civil
huge.
right,
Yeah.
and it's worth it. We need to look at how we're actually creating an education system that works, because if we continue on our path and we find people due to zip code or due to skin color are less likely to be educated in our schools, we have a systemic problem. And so the question, I don't want the discourse to only be public versus charter. I want a table set, stakeholders there. Charter, public, teachers, BTU, all of you, all of us, parents, even the kids need to be there and say, what is the system that is we have, and what's the system that we want? And what do we do to get there? And that's the conversation I'm excited to hopefully lead if I am elected to be a city councilor. I'm not willing to let us get stuck in the other conversation, as in you are just over there and you're just a charter or you're just a public school person. That limits creativity, that gets us to shut up, we start screaming at each other, and then we're winning, but are we willing?
You know, so running for city council, that's, in my estimation, the closest form of effectuating municipal government. You know, I mean, really boots on the ground, having that day-to-day eyeball-to-eyeball contact with those constituents. How do you feel about, say, running for city council versus being in the State House and writing legislation? Is it one or the other? Is it the same to you? What's your thoughts on governing?
I think city councilors are the closest to being community organizers. They are at ground zero, right? And you deal with everything, because there is no issue too quote unquote small for the city councilor, right? So you're Superman at all levels. Superwoman.
There you go.
So I think that's actually the benefit of it, and that's what excites me about the job. You could be called about the trees, you could be called about the potholes, you could be called about dog parks, right? But I think what excites me also is how this job is technically evolving. And so you need to see these different issues, education, so on and so forth, at the grassroots level, but also understand if there's a systemic issue. Are there more potholes on one side of town than the other?
Oh,
right?
okay.
Are certain areas getting their trees faster than others? And asking those questions and seeing the big picture, right? So that you can get to the details, but also be able to deal if there's a system that's not functioning for all, we need to revamp it or get rid of it. That's what I think is really necessary about this job. And at the state level, I don't know that you really can get as deep into the weeds as a city councilor can.
Speaking of, that equality, where do you come down on pay equity? I mean, I've always been perplexed by the fact that you can have a male and a female doing the exact same job, have the same level of ability, but because of gender, one gets paid less than the other. What's your thoughts on that, and how would you attack that? How would you remedy that?
Well, I think, my thoughts are very simple. We should have it. But I think we also need to define what is pay and literally what does the word equity mean. It's not enough to say dollar for dollar. It's also looking at the work culture we have set. my friends are still wondering how they can have a career and be a mother. Are we really allowing our office spaces, our construction sites to be open to parents, right? And what does that mean if I choose to take a break? And I think that's such an insulting thing to say to a young mother or young parents, period parents at all.
Right.
There's no break. There's no overtime. You're up at 3 a.m., you're getting thrown up on, and all sorts of other liquids are thrown at you. There's no break. You're just not at the office. So when we treat it like it's a break, and then we might resent the person when they try to return back to work. Is this person still on the same track to promotion that they were on? That's part of the whole equation and conversation. And the city should be leading that. This city should be leading how we're treating workers. And I'm really happy that we're pushing, with the paid family leave and looking at the city of Boston really driving that home. This is set the standard for employers, actually. The city should be moving much faster.
Healthcare, where do you come down on that?
I would love to see us have a single payer one day. But right now, I'm really happy with the Mass Health Connector, and I'd love to see that continue to expand. I personally think it's a social justice and civil right. To me, education and healthcare are directly connected. Lacking one can completely impact your future. And I see lack of education as a school-to-prison pipeline issue. And when it comes to lack of health care, especially early on preventative health care, you're seeing mortality rates in people of color that are much higher because I feel that there were so many different things. If diagnosed, if seen much early on, this person would have had a longer shot at a longer life.
Kind of as a connection to that, talk to me about the opiate scourge that's running rampant throughout not just the Commonwealth, but throughout the country, and the explosion of this use of opiates and other drugs.
Fentanyl.
That's really destroying not only families, but communities.
Oh, yeah.
How do our elected officials get their arms around that and remedy that situation, given the fact that it's not an overnight remedy? I get that. Okay. It took a while for us to get here. It's going to take a while for us to get out of this.
Absolutely.
But what are the steps? How do we attack it?
Well, I think the get here is really the where we should start, because we weren't always in this mindset that this was a mental health or health crisis, right? And we're still fighting for people to understand that. For a long time, we were locking people up to just get rid of the end results of their sickness. Either it was a crime that they committed or something that they did that we felt the society just rejected. So I think we need to really deal still with the stigma. And I think there's ways in which you get to that, and that is, I think Maura Healey has a wonderful program that starts with a curriculum that should be part of our public schools education that deals with addiction as young as the 8th grade. We need to have real conversations with kids about what drugs are, what they do to you.
I would say younger than 8th grade, but okay.
Okay, I'll tell Maura.
Yeah, no, I mean.
But I agree. I think we're both agreeing, though. We're not having real conversations with children about what addiction is, what it looks like, that it's a real health crisis. And for them to recognize it either in themselves or in their parents or their friends. And then to have the resources that they can turn to, either a school nurse, which I do think we should have more of, or that we turn to, even if it is a local office or someone they have been able to guarantee or build a bridge with and earn trust. They need to be able to talk to somebody about what's going on in their lives. I completely agree we need more beds, but before that's dealing with the fact that we have a lot more addicts. I'd love to deal with this issue much further upstream. And so again, dealing with the kids, making sure they're aware of what it is, addiction, and then also really having really frank conversation. And then one of the things I'd love to see more of is people who have gone through recovery, who are still in recovery, leading the conversation more. I think we oftentimes depend a great deal on medical experts. And there's a lot of mistrust with the community, with medical experts, because a lot of them ended up on opioids due to the fact that they got on Oxycontin and other kind of pain treatments. So I think that I would love to hear more from them. I'd love for them to be defining and talking about what would help, and for them to actually be the real leaders, those in recovery.
And I'll take a step further. I think that we need more beds out there for mental health also.
Oh, there you go.
Okay?
That's true.
I mean, so 36% of my female population is dual diagnosed. So they're suffering both from addiction and mental health.
And mental health.
42% of my population is suffering from the most passive to the most aggressive mental illness. And if a guy or a lady does something that's untoward, but there aren't there's no place for them to go outside of the walls of a facility like mine,
Right.
then they go to jail.
Yeah.
And clearly we can help them, but that's not what we're built to do. I mean, I have a full-blown infirmary and I've got medical folk on staff 24/7, 365, and that whole deal. But the issue is so big now and it's just getting out of control, and it seems like it's going at such a fast pace. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
I remember the crack explosion back in the 80s and just how that went crazy, but this opiate situation, it just seems to be that there are more addicts a lot quicker
Right.
falling into this. And so, you know, I'd like to see somebody do something about that. Now, in your district, District 1, you have a lot of immigrants
Oh, yes.
that live there, right? And we've got this situation, this national situation, as to what it is that we're going to do with the immigration population and deportation and so on and so forth. What do you say to the folks down in District 1, down in East Boston and the like, that talk to you about being fearful
Right.
of what's going on in this national, I don't know if it's discussion, I don't know what it is, national tragedy with sending people away?
Yeah, and so I've worked in immigration. I'm an attorney. I've done human trafficking, and some of my closest friends are immigrants. My husband is from Brazil, and so I think as a city councilor and just as Lydia Edwards, what I've consistently said to my neighbors, future constituents, is you are welcome here. I'm so proud that you are here. You are the backbone of our economy, especially in East Boston. A lot of the small businesses are owned by immigrants. And East Boston's history is one of immigrants. And so I think we need to start to say and talk more about how we are so excited about the diversity that we have. And on the other side, when someone is fearful, you know, one of the things I'm proud of that we did and are doing in our campaign is handing out Know Your Rights information along with my pamphlet. But it's important that we inform as we go, not just about me. It's bigger than me, right? And we make sure that folks are fully aware, you know, that this is, you know, your rights in the United States, regardless of your immigration status. And I'm proud of that. You know, I come from legal services. Many of my clients are immigrants. I think also what we need to do is really talk about local ways in which we can make sure our immigrant population feels like they are part of Boston. Municipal IDs is one way. Right, and making sure that they can show that they're present. Making sure that, you know, I'm really happy with some of the initiatives already at the city level for free community college, and just making sure that those initiatives are open to all, especially those kids who are, as they say, DACA-mented or DACA recipients. I want to make sure that we are educating our best and brightest and that they are never defined by a piece of paper.
So give us, you shared with us your thoughts on Nova Salient issues. But now, who is Lydia Edwards? What makes you you? What brings you to this work? What is your background?
Well, I often start off saying I'm an Air Force brat. My mother is a veteran. And so I've bounced around the world, and I think I got a perfect model of what is service in my mother. Service to country, service to community, and what that means. I was blessed to have also a twin sister named Erica. She lives in North Carolina. And the three of us were, well, I mean, my mother instilled in the both of us, actually, it's not going to be an easy world. Right. You're going to have to work for everything you have. And yeah, very much the same thing a lot of other parents have told their kids. You're going to have to be twice as good to get half as much. And so excellence is the standard in our family. But don't forget where you come from. So while we struggled and while we had reduced lunch, I became the first attorney in my family. I became the first homeowner in my family. But I do legal services because I believe in keeping that pathway open for everybody else and fighting for folks without a voice. And I so firmly believe in service to our community that we ended up starting a soup kitchen, myself and 4 other women in East Boston, where we feed between 100 and 125 people every Tuesday. Service is part of my character. I really believe not only in giving back, but that each one teach one, and then you reach back for one. And that's what I want to keep doing. And whatever career path I've chosen has always come back to service.
So I'm fond of saying that we get the government we deserve, okay? And this speaks to the lack of political engagement, the lack of too many folk, despite the color of their skin, that just do not vote. And then you have some folk in government that is really trying to depress and keep people away from voting, right? Talk to us about the importance of voting and how you would work to inspire people, particularly our young folk, to get out there and vote and be a part of the damn system.
Right. No, I think first I really I want to give credit where credit's due. I think it's Councilor Zakam, but same-day registration is one of the things I think is something we should be moving for as a city. I think that's one of the things, because if you get inspired to go and you show up, you should not be told no. You should be able to say, and there you vote, right? And so I want to make sure that we actually implement, it should be easier to vote, simple as that. And so you start there. And then I think in terms of actually getting people to get up and walk over there, that's the question, right?
So yeah, exactly.
I think you need to, I think we've done our best, and I'll give credit also where credit's due. Our president has certainly inspired a lot of folks to get involved in ways that they haven't done before, and we can leave it at that. But I think we have found people say that this is, I never looked at this election. This is the first election since November, right? This is the first one, a mayoral and also city council. And this is something that is worth paying attention to, because if you believe in either the resistance or compliance, whatever it is, it starts local. And so I think that there's a certain amount of energy out there that we need to capture on. So what we do, we bring voter registration wherever we go. We're registering people to vote. We went to the BHA housing in Charlestown and had a cookout. 200 people showed up and we registered 20 to vote. You know, we make sure, I think it comes from being a community organizer. It's about how to reach people where they are. Puppies in politics. Going to the dog parks and actually having a meet and greet there. You know, there's a real community of pet owners who are very passionate about their pets being part of their family, just like anybody else. And so meeting them where they are is part of inspiring them to be part of this process. And so I think as long as you keep doing that, and also talking in their language. I mean, I speak Spanish, I speak Portuguese. That's something very, that I'm finding still shocks a lot of folks when they hear that I would love to be your elected official in Spanish. And so making sure that the materials are in more than one language, making sure that we're registering folks to vote, and then also coming up with ideas. I mean, I want to look at participatory budgeting. They do that in Cambridge. They set aside $800,000 and say people directly vote on where that money is going to go. We can do that as a city of Boston. I think we do it with our youth. We could do it per district. You imagine how people get more involved at a younger age, who are excited about, you know, directing something for the first time. You plant that seed.
I mean, we need something to get young folk excited
Completely
about
agree.
this, because it's just they're not enough, you know, from what I see. But talking about young folks, where do you come down on the legalization of marijuana?
It's legalized, or we passed the ballot question.
But how do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, I feel okay about it. Honestly, I feel that we have the citizens or constituents have voted for it, and I think what we need to do is come up with real regulations to make sure that we haven't just opened ourselves up to just chaos. I believe in a sit-down adult conversation about the decision that we just made. And so what that means is really analyzing down to the grassroots, because the irony is, a lot of communities that voted for it don't want it in their community.
Well, there it is, right?
And so here we are.
Exactly,
so we all want this. We want the freedom to do, but not in my backyard, right? And so I think we need to wrestle as a state and as a local community with that kind of, I don't want to call it hypocrisy, but I do want to say that dichotomy, right? I want it, but not near me.
Well, you know, it's interesting because this cannabis commission that they put together, they've actually, from what I've read, they put a number of people on it that are not for the legalization of marijuana, which is interesting when you say that the polity voted for it, but the people now that are going to have jurisdiction over the process may not be as much. You see?
And I think that that's a good and bad thing. I mean, you don't want to assume, or you don't want to have everyone thinking the same way, period. Right? There should be a back and forth. This is something that we need to wrestle with and have real conversations about, but always guided by the fact that we made a decision. We made a firm decision that it should be legalized. And so we need to, as a state, start from that point. Right?
The thing that gives me pause about it is the THC, or the manipulation of the THC levels within the edibles, within the marijuana. You know, and so because we have so many kids here and so many students here, and you know, we'll go to college. You know what happens in college? People party. I mean, they study, but they party also. And I'm concerned that if they're ingesting a drug that could really, you know, have a very negative effect on them. That gives me major pause.
Of course, and I think that it's part of why we have an FDA, why we have food and drug regulation, period. You know, I mean, you could look at any kind of corporation that wants to make the most money. Look at cigarettes, for heaven's sakes, right? And the fact that a lot of what was known about nicotine wasn't known for so long, or about cancer, because of the fact that we were not either informed or the corporations didn't want us to be. And I think that that's what we want to make sure, is that there's a real understanding. I mean, I have no idea. With THC, I would have no idea what a level 1, 2, 3, I don't know how we're even going to measure it. I know what calories means, but this is totally new. I'm serious, and I think, how do we measure the potency of it? I want to have real conversations about that. And I agree with you 100%. I don't agree with candy cigarettes. I don't agree with candy lookalikes for drugs. I don't like the child or any kind of cuteness about alcohol. I want adult things to be seen as and for adults only. And so I think that that's part of the regulation, and that's what the community needs to be saying. We have strip clubs, and they're regulated, and I think we can regulate this as well.
We only have about 60 seconds left, and what I want you to do is to look into that camera over there and really talk to our viewers and tell them why they should give Lydia Edwards their vote next Tuesday.
I just want to say that next Tuesday is an important day because our city is at a pivotal moment. We are growing at an exponential rate, but many of us feel that we can't stay here. The struggle is real for far too many people, especially in District 1. And I think it's important to vote for someone like myself because I already have a record of fighting for people, of giving them a voice, and more than one language at that. My dedication to service, either as a legal service attorney or as a person serving plates at a soup kitchen, is real, and it demonstrates that I not only talk the talk, but I walk the walk. Being able to pass legislation after organizing thousands of domestic workers, that's something I'm proud of, not because of who I am, but I'm proud of the community that I was able to organize with. I love where I live, I love this city, and I feel it's 100% worth fighting for. So I'm going to ask for your vote on September 26th to be your next city councilor. Thank you.
Listen, I know you've got to run, you've got stuff, campaigning, you got to get on those doors, you got to do what you got to do. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us because it's very important. And as I say, you get the government you deserve, and we're going to make sure that we send the best possible person there to do the work. So thank you so much, and Godspeed to you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, folks, that's it for today. We're out of time. We're out of here. We'll be back again next week. Until then, you take care of yourself.